Hello indie game fans, the Steam Winter Sale is once again upon us, so here are my picks of some great games on sale. In order to prevent repetition, I've selected some of the more recent games at a decent discount, with more sales recommendations to come, so if you're not already, do subscribe to the channel for more indie gaming content. Let's begin with Bladed Fury, a super stylish 2D action platformer with a fantastic art style and great action. You play as a princess, exiled from her kingdom after her father was killed and her elder sister imprisoned, adventuring across the world seeking power in order to get her revenge. The combat is the main highlight, even incorporating fighting game style combo meters, with a variety in enemies range from regular foot soldiers to gigantic mythical bosses, so if you're in the mood for a great 2D platformer, this is one to get. One of the best games from last year is BPM Bullets Per Minute, a roguelite rhythm first-person shooter where you need to do everything on the beat, from firing your weapon, jumping, dodging, and so on. I often talk about flow state in games and how attaining that is such a satisfying experience, where this game manages to utilize that aspect to the highest degree. It has a very interesting color palette as well, not the most visually appealing, but it does contribute to the intensity of the title. Also of note is that this uses assets from Epic's cancelled MOBA Paragon, which is now free to use, and the developers have managed to adapt and use this to great effect, showing how to use assets right, since it is pretty well put together with their own unique spin on the first-person shooter. If you love pinball, an excellent modern digital version is Demon's Tilt, having the subtitle Occult Pinball Action, and that is not too far from the truth. While there is only one table, this has multiple sections and is ever evolving, where the table changes when you defeat a boss, which includes the Hermit, Priestess, and Chimera, where each has their own mechanics like spawning enemies or firing projectiles, all wrapped up with a great look. Tis not the season for Pumpkin Jack, but hear me out, this is one of the best modern 3D action platformers that has become a staple for Halloween. So while you might not exactly be in the mood for a game like this right now, 60% off is a pretty good deal to keep in the bank for next year's Halloween. This has you playing as Jack the Pumpkin Lord on an adventure to help evil destroy the good, with action and puzzles that are very reminiscent of a PS2 era title, but in a great way since it has been polished up. One of the best hidden gems from last year is Disc Room, an action game that will test your reaction speed since you're exploring rooms filled with deadly spinning saw blades. Of course, it is not as simple as that, since while the premise and concept remains the same throughout, this limitation has made the developers think very creatively as to how to vary up the experience with a number of different rules for each room, different types of saw blades, abilities for your character, and even the visual designs of the rooms. It also comes to us from the group that worked on the time-constrained Zelda-like Minute, of course making it of interest.
Yamato Corporation. Downloading coordinates.
You were personally selected for the job. We trust you are willing to accept.
Of course, Miss Rose.
A heavy outfit downtown has been growing at an alarming rate. This is where you come into play.
Bounty hunter.
We have several refugees from the Epic Games Store on this list that you might have missed for one reason or another, but the pixel art action platformer Hunt Down did come to Steam this year. This is an action title that has quite a sense of humour, having a vibe and aesthetic similar to what you would find in 80s or 90s action movies, where you play as bounty hunters going after the criminal gangs in the city. Each enemy faction feels unique, with a number of impressive and memorable boss fights as well. The deadpan delivery of the humorous writing is excellent as well. For example, in the other trailer, while describing the cyborg character, lines like "he was a man since he was a boy" and "his blood type spells AK-47, although he only donates other people's blood." So I do think that this game is fantastic, making it a no-brainer at 60% off. Across the board, one title that got many Game of the Year awards is Disco Elysium from 2019, a detective CRPG that wasn't quite what people expected 2 years ago and has now been updated to the final cut with additional content, making it the best time to jump in if you have not played this. This has you playing as a terrible character, a detective who has his share of flaws, investigating a murder which quickly spins out into so much more. While it looks like a traditional CRPG like Baldur's Gate or Divinity Original Sin, it does actually resemble more of an adventure game, with the D&D dice roll skill checks based on your stats, but it's quite a unique experience since combat is not the focus. The thought cabinet system of how your character grows and changes is fascinating as well, so experience one of the best indie games in recent memory if you have not.
Be a hero, a prophet, a madman, and the greatest detective the world has ever seen.
Arbiter. It was you who brought this devastation upon us. Do not repeat your past. Destroy the hero at its source.
Our other epic refugee is Forgone, a side-scrolling action platformer where you play as an arbiter, battling your way across the world that mixes sci-fi and fantasy in quite an interesting way. Most obviously, the art style of this game does resemble Dead Cells to a great extent, but is not a roguelite, instead being a linear experience with leveling, upgrades, a skill tree and loot, so if you are sick of run-based games, this is the title to get.
No more living weapons, no more experiments. I'll end your suffering right here, right now.
End it.
One of the more insanely popular games in recent memory is Mordhau, a medieval first-person multiplayer combat title that has held up surprisingly well in the 2+ years since release. For some reason, games like this do tend to attract and retain a huge player base, having about 2,500 concurrent users, peaking at 5,000 on Steam as of recording, so it's not too bad for an older title, and this is in the face of Chivalry 2 being released this year. The combat system here is the most interesting part, where moving your mouse actually controls the way you swing your weapon, which, combined with the variety of them, as well as additional factors like being on a horse, does make it very interesting and worth a play.
Brace yourself, striver, for a perilous journey lies ahead, one which none has hitherto survived.
Many of you asked what is the name of this game in my video on the best indie games of 2020, since I put it right at the front before going into the main list. So once again, I do have to give a shout out to Morbid the Seven Acolytes, a top-down Souls-like that certainly gives off Bloodborne vibes. You play as the last surviving member of a group who has trained their entire lives to defeat the 7 Acolytes and to save the world, delving into this cursed land in order to do so, with a number of upgrade and loot systems to play with. This is a pretty neat game, but it's one example that I point to as to why I discourage developers from releasing games in December, since they tend to get overlooked by outlets due to Game of the Year and the holidays, already being discounted at 70% off 1 year after launch. So if you don't own this, do consider supporting them, taking the #1 spot. For more Souls-like titles, watch these videos and I will see you after the jump.